Looking for NFL football? Stop right here. You found your home for weekly NFL talk and fantasy football. Coming to you live from the BackupPunter.com. This is the Backup Punter Podcast. Now, here's your host, the man who thinks fullbacks win championships, Keegan Matheson.
Welcome back. This is Keegan Matheson here, Backup Punter Podcast, episode 36. We're talking week 13 in the NFL, the week that was everything sandwiched between that Thursday night football game, Green Bay and Detroit, which was, it ended up pretty good, and Monday night football, which was, it's something we probably don't want to talk about. It's going to, bring up some old wounds, some nightmares, but we'll talk about it. Everything go through today. So thank you for listening in again, subscribing on iTunes, Stitcher, following along on Twitter at The Backup Punter if you're not already. It'll improve your life. It's free. Great price around the holiday season. So check that out on Twitter at The Backup Punter. Now, as always, the podcast, it's brought to you by the good people at DynastySportsEmpire.com. So whether you are into NFL like we talk, check them out next season, or NBA, NHL, MLB, fantasy sports, check them out for everything you need, and it's not just leagues. They have articles, advice, different platforms you can use there. So make them your one-stop shop. That's DynastySportsEmpire.com, DynastySportsEmpire.com. Give them a look. So this week, let's get to talking. Let's stretch it back. Let's go chronologically. Just sorting through my notes here. And we're coming to you a day late. The podcast usually drops on Tuesdays, and I've been pretty good on that schedule lately. I've been pretty good on the consistent Tuesdays. This week we bumped it to Wednesday. Yesterday I got a little wild. I also cover the Toronto Blue Jays for jaysjournal.com, and it's the MLB winter meetings right now. And Major League Baseball, it is, quite frankly, it's far more interesting on a transactional level than NFL football, and this is the big week of that. So that's been eating up my days, but always time for the podcast. Let's jump back. Thursday night football, Green Bay Packers, Detroit Lions. This game had all the makings of being a dumpster fire for the Packers. They were coming off a bad loss. Aaron Rodgers not looking right because his receivers have been playing like trash. His offensive line looks like 5 janitors that they found in the tunnel before the game. Devontae Adams is one of the most underperforming receivers in the league right now. A lot of people had him as a top 20 receiver going into the season, fantasy-wise, after Jordy Nelson went down. I was probably up around there. Let's have to delete those podcasts, I guess. He's been terrible. Randall Cobb hasn't been able to get free. Nothing going right. And then, for people like me, for idiots like me, who start Eddie Lacy for Thursday night football, and I had a big game involving Eddie Lacy. I had Eddie Lacy on my bench. I grabbed him off waivers a couple weeks ago. Grabbed him off waivers because somebody rightfully gave up on the guy. And, as is always the case, I kind of make my fantasy football decisions a little too much with my heart. So I said, you know what? To hell with it. If I'm going to lose, I'm going to go down in a beautiful ball of flames riding Eddie Lacy. Why not? Why not? I put him in. He barely sees the field. Barely sees the field. When he's out there, he doesn't look interested. Just doesn't look like he gives a damn at all. Not interested. A report comes out later at night, the next morning, that he missed curfew on Wednesday night. So that limited his snaps, which, that could open us up to a whole conversation about, you're late for curfew and you don't play, but if you're an absolutely monstrous human being, you do. I don't want to talk about that today. But anyways, Eddie Lacy, I think, put up less than 1 point for fantasy purposes, killed a lot of weeks. Thankfully, I still squeaked by in that league, so I don't have to hold anything against him. It was amazing, though, that night to Twitter search Eddie Lacy's name on Twitter just to see what people were saying about him. People need to get a grip on their lives. I'm telling you. Fantasy football, along with Twitter, so they're a bad combination. Fantasy football turns people into bloodthirsty, idiots a lot of the time. You should have seen Eddie Lacy's mentions. Oh, the threats and the insults. I mean, get a life, get a grip. But anyways, comes out that Eddie Lacy was late for curfew. He got played behind James Starks, and in the second half, got played behind undrafted rookie John Crockett. Now, I cover the Green Bay Packers for NFLSpinZone.com, so I knew who John Crockett was, and really, I love John Crockett. I remember in the draft was in April, so in May, I remember being told that I was writing too much about John Crockett by some commenter, internet commenters, also another great breed of human, especially in sports. But I remember someone telling me, why the hell are you wasting your time on this guy? He's not going to make the roster. And he didn't make the roster. Initially, he was signed to the active roster about 2 hours before kickoff in Detroit. The only reason he was even in Detroit is because he won the award for top practice squad player of the week for Green Bay. And that player gets to fly with the team to their game. It was a strange circumstance. He is going to be a little more involved, I think. Nothing to even come close to fantasy purposes. But he's one to keep an eye on because he is exciting. I mean exciting. Maybe he's how do I describe him best? A little bit taller, but runs a bit like a Devonta Freeman, perhaps. Not as successfully, but the same running style. You can get a visual in your head. Now, Coach Mike McCarthy said that Eddie Lacy is going to, I guess, be out of the doghouse now. He said that's behind him. Everything's in front of him. He'll have every opportunity. And if the Packers want to win, they have to. Because if they don't have a run game, they're not very good. Now, this game, obviously, on that last-second Hail Mary after the, was it a phantom face mask? I don't think so, but it could have gone either way. That Hail Mary, which Detroit played like absolute garbage. I mean, they couldn't have played, they could not have defended the Hail Mary worse. All the credit's going to Richard Rodgers, as it should, but no one touched him. Now, this game is getting remembered as a fantastic football game. It wasn't. It was bad for both sides. Green Bay got lucky. Very, very lucky. They were down 17-0 at half. And this is one that Green Bay, they take a win from it, but God, you can't really take a win from it. So let's jump over Sunday. Let's fast forward right until Monday Night Football. And I won't waste too much time being cranky about this being probably the worst football game of the season, which I know I say every week, but the NFL is absolutely terrible this year. What I want to get into, well, there's a couple things. We could talk about Dez Bryant. He had another little tantrum on the sidelines. Jerry Jones better find a good quarterback for Dez Bryant after Tony Romo leaves. And I'm almost thinking that he better find a good veteran quarterback because I don't know if Dez Bryant has the patience to learn for a couple of years with a rookie. I don't know about that. But what I want to get into, let's just breeze past the game itself. It was, on a positive note, let's smile for a second. I had, in one of my leagues, I needed one team to beat another for me to get into the playoffs. We're all familiar with that situation. I needed Deshaun Jackson to get my friend's team 67 yards. 6.7 points I needed for this complicated playoff picture to give me a playoff spot. Getting towards the end of the game, I think he needed about 13 more yards, 1.3 points remaining. And he gets the punt. And he does with that punt what he did. Ran 22 yards backwards trying to make something happen. Fumbles. And I say, hey, there goes my season. Which, you know what? That's fine. Fantasy heartbreak is far more common than fantasy happiness, which is something we should all explore. But I said, you know what? That's it. Then Deshaun Jackson, one of the final plays of the game, comes back. Touchdown. So Deshaun Jackson stamped my ticket into a fantasy football playoff picture, which is hilarious because I would never, ever, ever, ever roster Deshaun Jackson. So I'm thankful that he, from another roster, he reached over and gave me a pat in the back. So thank you, Deshaun Jackson. Excellent, excellent work. But from this game, the takeaway that I have is that hopefully this happens in my lifetime, the next 60 years or 2 years, whatever I have left, I don't know. But the NFL has got to, and I mean absolutely got to, explore something in terms of a developmental league. And I don't mean, starting up a completely new league with 30 minor league teams, one for each. That's too extreme. But they've got to either, maybe you form a little 6-8 team league of some, or maybe you form a partnership with another league. I don't think we're going to resurrect NFL Europe anytime soon. What I've said a couple times in the past is, why not explore some sort of partnership with the CFL? Now, different rules, different ball size, different caliber altogether, different country, better country. But anyways, with the CFL, what I've suggested a couple times is, why not let the NFL have 3 or 5 designated players that they can keep under contract for a year but send up to Canada? Instead of putting them on the practice squad, they can say, you know what, we want you in live game reps, we want you playing football, tackling each and every week, producing in a real situation. Go up to Canada, you're still one of our people, but you're going to go up there and play, and we're going to keep an eye on you. A lot of players have made that successful transition. Flutie, Cameron Wake, so it's not out of the question this can happen. And this isn't me being a stupid Canadian just pining for some sort of CFL bump. It doesn't matter to me at all. I don't watch the CFL. I don't. Maybe for my American listeners, the Grey Cup was recently, which is the Super Bowl of Canada. And I tuned in for about 2 minutes in the second quarter and turned it off. It didn't interest me. But I think that the NFL could use that, or something like that. You know what I mean? There's got to be something. And I've used this in the past for, I think we had this conversation with Michael Sam. And he came up to Canada. He flared out a little bit. It was a strange situation here. But anyways, I had that conversation with him because he represents, these defensive end linebacker types, or these guys that go in the 7th round or go undrafted, and then they struggle so hard. They struggle and struggle to get another look on a team. And they get signed for a couple days or released. Signed and released. They're never given a chance to play any more football past the NCAA level. So once they come into the draft at age 21, that's who they are. That's the player they are, and they don't get another chance to develop at all. You're going to go to the Arena League? That's nothing. The Arena League doesn't count. What are they going to do? And my argument for Michael Sam was, well, this is a guy that doesn't test out well, but on the field he plays well. He needs a spot where he can go and put up some numbers, tackle some people, put out some film for NFL teams to see. Because right now they just bring him in for a workout. He looks kind of slow, kind of clunky, and they don't like it, so he's not going to see the field, ever. And then what happens is that in another 11 months, there's a new crop of undrafted free agents who are a year younger. And they're new, they're shiny. So teams go after those, and the last draft class from a year ago, they're toast. Because they don't have anywhere to play football. They get out of college, that's it. They are who they are, and unless they are a top 6, top 5 round draft pick, they don't get a chance. Unless they can make a roster, that training camp, right there, immediately, they're done. Well, what if they're injured at that point? What if they have a bad camp? What if they are completely raw? They're trying to transition into a new position in the field, something like that. Now, that's the first part. That's the first part of why I think the NFL needs a bit of a developmental league or agreement. The second part is Matt goddamn Cassel. Watching Matt Cassel play the quarterback position on Monday night was beyond frustrating. It wasn't, I wasn't a frustrated football fan. I was just, one of these things where I wasn't mad, I was just disappointed. I was disappointed that the NFL has hit a point where somebody as shitty as Matt Cassel is starting a game, and not just starting a game for a bottom dweller, the Cowboys kind of are, but starting a game for America's team, Jerry Jones's Dallas Cowboys. I mean, how desperate, how horrible is the state of the quarterback position in the NFL right now? We've got guys like Matt Schaub starting games. Matt Hasselbeck, the oldest, I think, non-kicker or punter in the league, starting games for the Indianapolis Colts and not looking even close to the worst quarterback in the league. He's competent. But you've got guys like Matt Schaub, Austin Davis, starting in Cleveland, and Matt Cassel. Brandon Weeden started some games too. But what position are we going to compare quarterback to? I guess starting pitcher in baseball, the goalie in hockey, I think would be a fair comparison. Well, look in the NHL. In the NHL right now, you could pick out 40 or 50 goalies from the 30 teams, There are more starting caliber goalies, or at least starting competent goalies, than there are teams. Look around baseball. There are more, there are more than enough arms to fill every major league team. And there are more than enough young arms coming up through minor league systems. Development systems. What the hell do you know? But in the NFL, it's so thin. It's so thin. And a lot of teams are trying to be progressive about this and invest in backup quarterbacks, but there's nobody out there. There is nobody out there. And it's difficult enough to find a franchise quarterback, to find your Aaron Rodgers, your Cam Newton, etc. But for teams that can't even do that, there's nothing left. There really isn't. Even this year, we've seen guys like Jay Cutler. This year, he's probably in the top half of quarterbacks in this league for all the crap he gets. Guys like Ryan Fitzpatrick are just incredibly valuable right now. Ryan Fitzpatrick's going to start somewhere next year because he is that valuable. He's either going to start or get a massive backup payday, but he's going to start. So you look around the league, and I think the biggest purpose, the biggest advantage of a developmental platform of some sort, a developmental agreement, league, whatever the hell you want to call it, would be for quarterbacks. Because they need that more than anything. They need live game action. They need people blitzing them, tackling them. They need to play against professional caliber-ish defenses. Because you look at guys that, once they fall out of a starting role in the NFL, like Matt Cassel, or even if they never get that starting role, if they're a career backup, a guy like Charlie Whitehurst or something, they, obviously it's an issue of talent, of arm talent, of physical talent. But at the same time, there's absolutely zero comparable scenario for live action as a quarterback. And that's why a lot of teams are turning to virtual reality right now. A great deal of teams are investing in virtual reality technology for their quarterbacks to learn, because they're having such a hard time simulating any of this. So that's difficult. And I think that needs to be addressed. What do you think? There's got to be a better idea out there. A better idea from a better brain than mine. Hit me up on Twitter, @TheBackupPunter. And tell me what you think. Especially if you're an American listening to this and you're just choking, dying at the thought of sending your precious football players up to my great nation. So looking elsewhere around the league this week, another big storyline over the last couple of days, Johnny Manziel. Hey, tired of talking about him yet? We won't spend too much time on him. Well, he was, a couple weeks ago, he was going to be the starter for the last 6 games of the season. Then there was a video of him drunk in a bar, blah, blah, blah. Then he wasn't the starter. Austin Davis became the starter, which, hooray. That didn't go well. Austin Davis played football terribly. Now, Mike Pettin has named Johnny Manziel the starter for the rest of the season. Officially. This is, I'm trying to think, rack my brain here. This is at least the 6th quarterback change they have made. It might be the 7th. between Manziel, McCown, Davis. At least 6 quarterback changes. You wonder why the Browns are trash? And it kills me because I love the Browns. I mean that. The Browns have always been a team where, I love to start a franchise with them in Madden and try to rebuild them. The classic Browns, the Jim Brown Browns. They're one of these NFL classic teams, like the Raiders. I say this all the time. The NFL is such a better place if the Browns or the Raiders are succeeding. And with the Browns, it kills me because a lot of this, I say it all the time, has to do with one of the worst owners in sports. Absolute idiot. And that's being shown again here because the rumor around Cleveland is that Mike Pettin is being pressured by ownership to start Johnny Manziel. And that he's doing this in a bit of an effort to save his job. Number one, because the team has performed poorly, but number two, because Cleveland loves to fire head coaches. They love to hit reset, and hit reset. So that's a scary one. Mike Pettin making a choice just because ownership wants to. Now, I think you all know that I do feel they need to see what they have in Johnny Manziel in some sense. They can make the call on the off-field stuff because they know a hell of a lot more than I do. But if they're comfortable with it, which is a big if, and I don't know about that if, but if they're comfortable with it, see what you have. See what you've got in the guy because entering the offseason, they have no clue what's going on at quarterback. But I feel bad for Mike Pettin. I really do because I like Mike Pettin. I like him as a human being, I guess, which nobody cares about in the NFL. But I think he's a good guy in a bad place. So elsewhere around the league, Carolina Panthers. Somehow they're doing this quietly. Somehow. I'll talk about Cam Newton again in a second when we get to the studs and duds. He had a big week. Carolina Panthers. Top of the New Orleans Saints, and this was an important win for them because it wasn't a good win. My fear with any of these teams that just ride all season long, we saw this with the Green Bay Packers several years ago when they went 15-1 and then fell out of the playoffs pretty quick. There is a such thing as an NFL season being too easy for a team. I believe in that. Now with the Carolina Panthers, this tight game against the New Orleans Saints, which was flawed, which was full of mistakes, which wasn't the best coached game or the best planned game, they overcame that, and I think that's big. They're now at 12-0, and I'm going to be watching them down the stretch. Let's just bring up their schedule here right now. You can hear me typing. How unprofessional is this? But I want to bring up the Carolina Panthers schedule the rest of the way because I know they have the Falcons and Giants coming up. I want to see who's past that. Oh boy. Sunday, December 13th, Atlanta Falcons. Then they play the Giants. Then they play the Falcons again. Then the Buccaneers. How about that? Falcons, Giants, Falcons, Bucks to go 16-0. Do you think that's doable? Because I do. Then the Philadelphia Eagles. I almost said Philadelphia Phillies. You see, I have baseball on the brain. Winter meetings week. The Philadelphia Eagles topped the New England Patriots. As I predicted all along, of course. I'm joking. This was quite the game. And really, this was kind of the formula for the Eagles to beat New England. By Chip Kelly's wacky offense kind of working. By special teams dominating, really. It was a good special teams win, and in the same way I'm glad that Carolina got challenged a bit. In a very strange way, I almost fear the New England Patriots more now. Because this already was kind of the FU season. So coming off a loss like that, especially if and when they get Gronkowski back the next week or two, they get some of these receivers back, hopefully Edelman later in the year. Maybe Brandon LaFell will learn how to play football. That's going to be scary. It's going to be scary. But thankfully for them, they still sit comfortably atop the AFC East at 10-2. Let's take a quick rundown of the divisions here. Patriots sitting on top of the AFC East at 10-2. Jets, they're in the middle of that wild card race at 7-5. AFC North, you've got the Bengals at 10-2. They're making a run for that bye as well. Steelers in there at 7-5 in that wild card as well. Same story in the AFC West. Broncos at 10-2, vying for that bye with another 7-5 team, the Kansas City Chiefs, who are just about as hot as anyone in football right now with a very good defense. I don't want to play them if I'm another team. And then we have the AFC South. The Colts, the Texans, tied at 6-6. That's an interesting one. I got to admit I'm rooting for the Texans. I'd love to see them just creep into the playoffs and see what they can do. Jaguars and Titans, bottom feeders there, but they're going somewhere. Marcus Mariota, 87-yard touchdown rush this week. Third longest as a quarterback in history. Dorial Green-Beckham, watch out for him next year. He's getting some real usage. So one of the Colts or Texans are going to make it by default. The other one might be able to sneak into that wild card conversation. Looking at the NFC, of course, we have the Panthers, 12-0 in that NFC South. Bucks and Falcons, both at 6-6 there. Saints, looks like New Orleans is out of it. 4-8. They were 4-4. And that breaks my heart. Now they, the Saints have been run terribly. Their cap situation is one of the worst, not just in the league, but one of the worst I've ever seen. Some of the money they've gotten themselves tied to is just brutal. Just brutal. But I hate seeing it for Drew Brees, because he's can they rebuild in time to match up with his window? I don't think so. NFC North, we've got the Packers back ahead of the Vikings now, who got stomped by the Seahawks. Packers and Vikings, two exciting but flawed teams. They'll meet the last week of the season, I think, at Lambeau Field. The other one will, one winner, the other one will take a wild card spot. NFC West, we've got the Cardinals at 10-2 out in front, and the Seahawks at 7-5. They will end up, I think, with the other wild card spot that doesn't go to the NFC North. Rams and Niners both down at 4-8. A quick note about the Niners. A report this week that Colin Kaepernick was involved in some of the free agent meetings. That he's part of their future plans. I don't even want to talk about it. It gets me too stressed out. I don't want to talk about Colin Kaepernick, NFL quarterback. Anyways, in the NFC East, like we talked about earlier, it's such a bad division, but if you forget that for a second, it's exciting as hell. Like, follow me along with that. If we just accept, if we pretend for a moment that the Redskins, Eagles, and Giants, all at 5-7, don't think of them as 5-7 teams. Just think of them as tied. The Cowboys at 4-8, don't think of them at 4-8. Think of them as a game behind. Because this division gets awfully, awfully interesting. Watch Chip Kelly sneak into the playoffs and win a game or two. The Redskins do have the advantage right now. They are in first place by tiebreakers. But the Cowboys, what if they get Tony Romo back? That's going to be an interesting one. So let's keep chugging along, and before we get into our weekly studs and duds, like I said last week, not really doing any waiver wire news for this time of year. If you do have a question, send it along. And we did get one question. Again, I'll keep working on my basic speaking skills, but we did get one question this week from friend of the show, Ryan Andrews. He asks, pick two of the three, Amir Abdullah, Tyler Lockett, or T.Y. Hilton. So I poured over this, went deep into the data, took a long walk in the woods to think. If I've got those three guys, I'm going with Hilton and Abdullah. And I love Tyler Lockett. This last week was the only time in the season, though, he's gone over 5 targets. And I think he's still someone that is touchdown dependent. I do think he still is. Now, he can get that on a return as well. But T.Y. Hilton has the Jacksonville Jaguars secondary coming up. And the Jags have shown they can put up some points, too, against poor defenses like Indianapolis has. So I think that's going to turn into a bit of a throwing game. I think T.Y. Hilton does a little better than he did this week, which isn't hard. Amir Abdullah has also had 12-plus carries in each of the last few weeks. He's facing the Rams, which I don't love, But I think you'll see a little bit more of him in the screen game, I hope. Hasn't found the end zone recently, so I think he is due, but I think with Tyler Lockett, I'm betting on a touchdown. Because I don't really see him getting that 85-yard game on 6 catches with no score. I don't know if I do. But if I'm in a dynasty league, ooh-wee, let me tell you, I've got Tyler Lockett on my radar. So let's bounce through the studs and duds from the week that were. Just in case you didn't pay any attention at all to football, or if you want a roundup. Because it's easy to lose track. Especially this time of year. I don't know if you've all found this, but with no bye weeks, in the early game slot, you've got 8-10 games on at the same time, and my head kind of spins. So let's look at the studs. We have Cam Newton coming in at the QB spot, 331 yards, 5 touchdowns, plus 10 rushes for 49 yards. It's amazing what happens, and this is all I'll say on Cam Newton. It's amazing what happens when you draft an athletic quarterback and you don't try to reverse engineer him into something he isn't. Amazing thing happen. RB1, Javorius Buck Allen, 17 rushes for 63 yards. And then because Matt Schaub cannot and should not throw downfield, he had 12 catches, 107 yards and a score. Great day by Javorius Buck Allen. He's one to watch next year too. What's Justin Forsett's role going to be? RB2, TJ Yeldon, a guy that I really do like. He hasn't really... It seems like he's averaging 3 to 3.5 yards per carry each week, but I like what's happening with him. TJ Yeldon, 15 rushes, 57 yards, and a score. Then he adds 4 receptions for 79 yards. Looking at wide receivers, number 1, we've got Allen Robinson, a beast, 10 catches, 153, and 3 scores. Wide receiver 2, Antonio Brown, 8 catches for 118 yards and 2 scores of his own. He also had that celebration on the goalpost, which, how dare someone have fun in the NFL? I think they should suspend him for a minimum of 6 years. Jeremy Maclin. Maclin comes in at wide receiver 3. There were a couple people that outscored him, but I wanted to give this one to Maclin because he spent that early half of the season really struggling to... Not even struggling in terms of performance, but struggling to get some eyeballs on himself. You know, the Chiefs were not pushing the ball downfield. Familiar story. But without Jamal Charles in the picture, they've had to a little bit more, and it's working. Jeremy Maclin, 9 catches for 95 yards, 2 touchdowns. Tight end 1. It's funny. Richard Rodgers of the Green Bay Packers. Earlier in the week, I wrote one entire article about this and mentioned it in another, that he just does not have the athleticism, the yards after catch, running ability, any of that, to be a 1A. He's got to be a 1B tight end. And I still do believe that. I still stand by that. But credit where it's due. 8 catches for 146 yards and a touchdown. Fun fact, I played against Richard Rodgers in a league this week. That's not a fun fact. It's a very sad fact. Defense. Pittsburgh Steelers against the Indianapolis Colts. I suggested them as a waiver pickup to a couple people on Twitter this week, so I was thankful because I don't like looking stupid as often as I do. 10 points against. That's all they allowed. 5 sacks, 2 interceptions, and a return TD for the Pittsburgh Steelers. A good day by them. They're not the stoutest defense, but they're making the odd play lately. Quarterback of the dud team, I think this is a repeat performance. Phillip Rivers, 202 yards, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. RB1 of the duds, making what might be his first appearance ever on the Backup Punter podcast dud team, Adrian Peterson. 8 rushes for 18 yards. They played Seattle. They got blown out. He got taken out of the game plan. Not really his fault, but didn't make it happen. RB2, DeMarco Murray. 8 rushes for 24 yards. Again, he keeps teasing us. Rumor this week that he expressed his worries. He expressed his worries over his role in a meeting with owner Jeffrey Lurie. Well, if I'm owner Jeffrey Lurie, I say, number 1, I'm paying you a hell of a lot of money and you knew what you were getting into. Number 2, play better. Don't complain after rushing 8 times for 24 yards. If you rush 8 times for 59 yards and you don't keep getting the ball, then complain. But if you play bad, I mean, pound sand. I don't get that one. I don't understand it. Wide receiver 1, Emmanuel Sanders, 3 catches for 19 yards. He couldn't get it going this week. Wide receiver 2, a name we haven't really talked about for good or bad reasons much this year. Not since earlier on. Jarvis Landry, just 2 catches for 5 yards. And then a guy I mentioned earlier, wide receiver 3, Brandon LaFell. Had him on a roster. Eek. 4 catches for 27 yards for Brandon LaFell. Did not catch the ball naturally, we will say. And coming in this week at the Michael Bennett dud team tight end position is Michael Bennett. 3 catches for 14 yards. He's now on injured reserve with a rib injury. If you need a tight end, Zach Miller, Chicago Bears, grab him. And the dud defense of the week, the New England Patriots. That's 2 Patriots on the dud team. This is uncomfortable. I feel like I'm going to get a knock on my door, and you're never going to hear from me again. They were playing the Eagles. They allowed 29 points. Only got 1 sack. I think 1 fumble recovery. They didn't, as a fantasy defense, you can allow all the points you want. It doesn't really matter if you can put up some counting stats, some sacks, interceptions, fumbles, etc. Didn't happen this week for the New England Patriots. So that's the studs and duds. And hey, that's the podcast. I thank you for tuning in. My name's Keegan Matheson. Find me on Twitter, @TheBackupPunter. And I'm sure you're already subscribed if you are listening, but if not, check it out on iTunes, on Stitcher. And people tell me Stitcher's a popular platform for Android users. I just keep saying that. Maybe people have lied to me. You never know. But check it out on Stitcher if that is your jam. Or suggest it to your friends. Give someone a subscription to the Backup Punter podcast for Christmas. It's a free gift. They won't like you, but we'll all be happy. So join us next week. It'll be episode 37. By that point, if you don't know already, you should know your playoff picture. So like I said, if you're going to make any additions, try to get some handcuffs for your stars going into the playoffs. I know a lot of leagues entered their league this past week. Some leagues have 1 more week left, so best of luck with that. Hopefully you find your way into the playoffs in more leagues than you don't, which is all we can ask for. All you can ask for in fantasy football. So again, this is Keegan Matheson, hoping that all of your punts in life stop on the 1-yard line. Thanks for listening, and we will talk next week.